Ladies and gentlemen, let's cut straight to it. You ever see an older man look at a young woman like she's a second chance at youth, instead of a human being with her own mind, her own goals, her own agency? Yeah, that right there. That's the mistake. Never, and I mean never, treat a young woman like she is your fountain of midlife crisis relief. Because the truth is, she's not your cure. She's not your ego boost. She's not your trophy. She is her own universe. Now, I'm not saying older men and younger women can't connect. Respect knows no age limit. Wisdom and curiosity can be beautiful when they meet. But here's where it goes wrong: when power replaces respect. When you assume your years give you authority over her choices, her boundaries, her body, or her future. Listen, if you are an older man, never downplay her voice just because you've got more years under your belt. Experience does not equal entitlement. Never project your failed dreams onto her, expecting her to live in your shadow. And please, for the love of dignity, never dress manipulation up as mentorship. She doesn't need a guide. She needs respect. You want to know the biggest secret? A young woman doesn't need saving. She doesn't need shaping. She doesn't need reminding that you've seen it all before. What she needs is space to become, without being preyed on, patronized, or positioned as someone's midlife project. So here's the challenge to every older man in this room: if you truly value young women, show it in the simplest way possible. By treating them as equals. Don't flirt under the guise of wisdom. Don't use your age as a weapon. Don't call it love if it's really control. Because the truth is, the mark of a real man is not how young the woman beside him is, it's how deeply he respects her, no matter her age. Thank you. When we say, never treat a young woman as your second chance at youth, we're talking about one of the most common yet damaging dynamics that plays out between older men and younger women. It often begins with a seemingly innocent fascination. An older man sees a young woman, and suddenly she becomes more than herself. She becomes a mirror reflecting back the years he wishes he could relive. He sees in her the energy, the freedom, the possibilities that he feels slipping away from his own life. But here's the problem: she is not a mirror. She is not a cure for regret. She is not a symbol of what you've lost or a ticket to rewind the clock. She is a human being with her own identity, her own dreams, and her own sense of time. When an older man treats a young woman as his second chance at youth, he reduces her from a whole person to a projection. Instead of seeing her as she is, complex, growing, multidimensional, he sees her as an extension of himself, a way to rewrite the past or to mask insecurities about aging. And while that might satisfy his ego temporarily, it robs her of the respect she deserves. She is not on this earth to fulfill his unfinished story. She is here to write her own. Think about the pressure that places on a young woman. Instead of being valued for her thoughts, her voice, or her individuality, she is constantly measured against what she can provide to someone else's sense of self. It's like being trapped in a role she never auditioned for, where her worth is tied to how much she can make him feel younger, stronger, or more desirable. That kind of dynamic is unfair and ultimately unsustainable. It creates an imbalance where she becomes the caretaker of someone else's nostalgia, instead of being allowed to experience her own present. Another danger of treating a young woman as a second chance at youth is that it blurs the line between admiration and possession. On the surface, it may look like admiration: she's beautiful, lively, inspiring. But underneath, it's about possession. It's about wanting to hold on to something that reminds him of what he feels he's lost. And when admiration turns into possession, it strips her of autonomy. Suddenly, she isn't appreciated for who she is today. She's being used as a vessel for someone else's longing. This attitude also prevents genuine connection. Real connection is built on respect, honesty, and equality. If a man is caught up in using a young woman as a symbol of his own youth, he is not truly seeing her. He is interacting with a fantasy. That means the relationship, whatever form it takes, is built on imbalance. He's not meeting her where she is. He's dragging her into where he wishes he could be. Over time, that erodes trust. No one wants to feel like they're being loved or valued for the role they play in someone else's self-image, instead of for who they actually are. It's also worth considering the long-term consequences of this behavior. For the man, it may provide short-lived validation, but it doesn't solve the real issue: his discomfort with aging, his fear of irrelevance, or his dissatisfaction with his own life. For the young woman, it can be damaging in deeper ways. It can distort her understanding of love, partnership, and self-worth. It can teach her that relationships are about filling voids instead of building something authentic together. And those lessons can take years to unlearn. At the heart of it, this key point is about respect. Respect means acknowledging someone as a full human being, not as a substitute, not as a symbol, not as a second chance. When an older man treats a young woman as his second chance at youth, he denies her the dignity of being seen for herself. The most powerful thing any man can do in that situation is to confront his own feelings about aging, face his regrets honestly, and refuse to place them on someone else's shoulders. Because no young woman should ever carry the weight of someone else's lost time. She deserves the freedom to live her own youth, not to be cast in the role of someone else's. Respect must outweigh power, because without respect, power quickly becomes abuse, manipulation, or control. When an older man interacts with a younger woman, there is often an unspoken imbalance present. He has lived longer, may have more resources, more life experience, and sometimes more social influence. That in itself is not inherently wrong. Experience can be a gift, wisdom can be shared, and mentorship can be empowering. But the danger comes when that natural imbalance is used as leverage, when it shifts from being supportive to being dominating. In such cases, power overshadows respect, and what could have been a relationship of growth turns into one of exploitation. Respect is the acknowledgement that the other person has equal value, even if they do not have equal years. It means listening to her voice without assuming you already know better. It means allowing her space to disagree without punishing her for it. It means recognizing that while you may have lived longer, her experiences and her perspective are just as valid as yours. Too often, older men believe that time lived automatically makes their opinions superior. They confuse age with authority, forgetting that respect is earned, not enforced. When power is given priority over respect, the relationship becomes lopsided. The older man might speak over her, dismiss her opinions, or make decisions without considering her input. He may disguise control as protection, telling himself he is guiding her when in reality he is silencing her. This creates an environment where her independence is diminished. She no longer feels like an equal partner in the interaction, but like a subordinate, someone who exists to follow rather than to contribute. And that is not respect. That is ownership dressed in the clothing of care. Respect requires humility. It requires the older man to recognize that his age does not make him the authority over someone else's life. His role, if he truly cares, is not to dominate but to collaborate. Respect says, your choices matter as much as mine, your boundaries are as important as mine, and your dignity is non-negotiable. Power without respect ignores all of that. It turns the younger woman into an object of control, a piece on a board where only one player gets to decide the moves. It is important to note that respect is not passive. It is active. It is shown in the way conversations are held, in the way disagreements are handled, and in the way decisions are made. If an older man insists on always being right because he is older, if he listens, even when he disagrees, and gives weight to her perspective, he is choosing respect. Power says, I know better. Respect says, I want to know you better. That difference is the foundation of every healthy dynamic. Respect must outweigh power because power fades, but respect builds. An older man may have influence today, but one day he will not. If the only thing keeping a younger woman close to him is the weight of his authority, she will eventually leave when she finds her own strength. But if she feels respected, if she feels her voice matters, she will stay because she wants to, not because she feels she has to. Respect creates longevity. Power creates resentment. There is also a moral responsibility at play. Older men often know the weight of their influence, even if they pretend not to. Choosing to lean on power rather than respect is a choice to take advantage of vulnerability. It may feel subtle at first, but it shapes how the younger woman sees herself and her worth. If she is constantly treated as someone who must bow to authority, she may start believing she is incapable of making her own decisions. Respect does the opposite. It reinforces her agency, giving her the courage to stand on her own feet. At its core, this principle is simple. If you truly value someone, you do not use your power to silence them, you use your respect to lift them. A relationship, a friendship, even a conversation, should not be a tug of war over control. It should be a meeting of equals, no matter the age difference. Respect must always outweigh power, because power without respect is tyranny, but respect, even without power, is love. Never disguise manipulation as mentorship, because the difference between the two is as wide as night and day. even though on the surface they can sometimes look similar. Mentorship is supposed to be about guidance, growth, and empowerment. It is a relationship where one person, usually more experienced, offers wisdom and support to help another person flourish. Manipulation, on the other hand, is about control. It is about bending another person's will to serve your own desires or insecurities. When an older man disguises manipulation as mentorship with a younger woman, he crosses a dangerous line. He takes what should be a nurturing role and twists it into a self-serving one. This often begins subtly. It may look like advice at first. "I think you should do this instead of that," or "Trust me, I know how the world works." At times, guidance is useful and even necessary, but the problem comes when it no longer serves her growth and instead serves his agenda. Manipulation creeps in when the so-called mentor positions himself as indispensable, as though she cannot succeed without his hand in every decision. He creates a dependency, one where her choices always have to filter through his approval. What may have started as support quickly becomes control. The disguise is dangerous because manipulation dressed as mentorship can make a young woman doubt her instincts. She begins to question whether she is truly being helped or whether she is being subtly steered into decisions that benefit him more than her. A manipulative older man might frame his interference as care. He may say, "I just don't want to see you make mistakes." But what he really means is, "I want to make sure you follow the path that keeps me comfortable, that keeps me in control." True mentorship allows room for mistakes, because it recognizes that growth often comes from trial and error. Manipulation denies that freedom because mistakes might weaken his control. It is also important to understand that manipulation often thrives on praise. The manipulator gives compliments not as genuine encouragement, but as currency to keep the younger woman tied to his approval. He praises when she follows his advice and withholds when she doesn't. Over time, this creates a pattern where she begins to crave his validation, mistaking it for mentorship. Instead of trusting her own voice, she becomes trained to listen for his. That is not mentorship, it is conditioning. Another tactic of disguised manipulation is the use of fear. A manipulative older man might warn a younger woman of all the dangers that await her if she ignores his counsel. "You'll regret it," he says, or "You'll never find someone who cares as much as I do." Instead of empowering her to take risks and build resilience, he frightens her into obedience. Real mentorship does not use fear as a tool. It builds confidence, not anxiety. The tragedy of this disguise is that it exploits trust. A young woman might genuinely believe she is being supported, when in reality she is being groomed into dependence. This can delay her growth, erode her confidence, and distort her understanding of what healthy guidance looks like. She may later struggle to distinguish genuine mentorship from control, carrying scars from a relationship that was never what it claimed to be. For the older man, choosing manipulation over mentorship is not only harmful to her but revealing of him. It shows a lack of integrity, a fear of losing power, and a willingness to stunt someone else's growth to soothe his own insecurities. A true mentor is secure enough to let a young woman surpass him, to let her outgrow his guidance, and to celebrate when she no longer needs his hand. A manipulator clings tightly because his goal was never her success, it was his relevance. To disguise manipulation as mentorship is to rob someone of their autonomy while pretending to serve them. It is a betrayal because mentorship requires trust, and trust is destroyed the moment guidance becomes a mask for control. If an older man genuinely wants to mentor a younger woman, his responsibility is simple: offer wisdom freely, respect her independence, and step back when she is ready to walk on her own. Anything less than that, no matter how it is packaged, is manipulation, and it should never be mistaken for care. Do not project failed dreams onto her, because to do so is to take away her freedom to live a life that belongs only to her. Every person carries dreams, some fulfilled, some broken, and some that never had the chance to bloom. When an older man looks at a younger woman and sees in her not herself, but the embodiment of all the chances he missed, he begins to burden her with a weight she never asked to carry. It is one thing to share wisdom, to pass on lessons learned from roads once walked, but it is something entirely different to turn another person into the stage where you attempt to relive your unfinished story. Projecting failed dreams is subtle at first. It might sound like encouragement. "You should go after this career, I never got the chance." Or, "Don't waste time. I want you to accomplish what I couldn't." On the surface, it seems like advice rooted in care. But beneath it lies a kind of possession. Instead of supporting her in discovering her own desires, the older man begins to push her toward paths that soothe his own regrets. She becomes less of an individual and more of a vessel through which he tries to rewrite history. The tragedy is that her own voice becomes muffled by the echoes of his past. The problem with projecting failed dreams is that it erases her agency. A young woman has her own passions, her own ambitions, her own calling. She deserves the freedom to fail at what she chooses, to succeed in directions that may not make sense to anyone else. When someone places their unfulfilled goals on her shoulders, they are asking her to live a life that does not fit. It is like giving her a costume from another era and expecting her to dance a play that ended long before she was born. Even if she tries to wear it, the seams will never feel right, because it was never hers to begin with. This projection also distorts love and mentorship. Instead of offering genuine support, the older man's care becomes conditional. She feels valued not for who she is, but for how well she performs the role he has written for her. If she chooses differently, he may express disappointment, frustration, or even withdrawal of affection. That is not love. That is not guidance. That is an attempt to control the narrative of her life in order to ease the pain of his own. The relationship becomes a transaction where her identity is exchanged for his comfort. For the young woman, the weight of carrying someone else's failed dreams can be suffocating. She may find herself chasing goals that do not ignite her spirit, constantly wondering if her choices are truly hers or just obligations inherited from another. Over time, this can erode her sense of self. She begins to believe her worth is tied to how well she redeems someone else's regrets, instead of how authentically she lives her own truth. And when she finally realizes that she was never walking her own path, the damage of lost years can feel irreversible. For the older man, projecting failed dreams is ultimately a refusal to confront his own reality. Instead of facing regret with honesty, he attempts to outsource healing by pushing it onto another. But the truth is, no one can live for someone else. The work of making peace with what was lost belongs only to him. Using another person, especially a young woman, as the canvas for that healing is not only unfair but deeply harmful. It keeps him trapped in the past and prevents her from fully embracing her present. The healthier alternative is to separate memory from mentorship. It is possible to say, "Here is what I once wanted, here is what I learned, and here is how I hope you find your own way." That offers wisdom without control, perspective without projection. It gives her the gift of knowledge while respecting her right to choose. Real care is about equipping her, not scripting her. To project failed dreams onto a young woman is to rob her of the one thing no one should ever take: the right to define herself. Her life is not an extension of another person's unfinished story. It is her own novel with her own chapters, her own plot twists, her own ending. The greatest act of respect an older man can give is to let her write it, without trying to hold the pen himself. A young woman doesn't need saving or shaping because she is not a project, not a blank page waiting to be written on by someone else, and not a fragile figure in need of rescue. Too often, older men see younger women through a distorted lens. They view them as unfinished beings who require guidance, molding, or protection in order to be complete. But this perception does more harm than good. It strips a young woman of her autonomy, reduces her complexity, and imposes on her the idea that she cannot navigate her own life without external correction. The truth is, she is already whole, already capable, already strong enough to write her own story. The myth of saving is especially damaging. It frames a young woman as if she is lost or broken and needs an older man to swoop in and fix her life. This narrative is as old as fairy tales, where the princess waits for the hero to arrive. In reality, no one is waiting. She is living, learning, and growing on her own terms. When an older man assumes the role of savior, he disregards her ability to solve her own problems and denies her the dignity of self-determination. Even worse, he positions himself as the center of her story, as if her success or survival depends on his intervention. That is not empowerment. It is possession dressed in the disguise of care. The notion of shaping is equally suffocating. To shape someone implies that who they are is not enough, that they must be molded into a form that fits another person's vision. When an older man treats a young woman as clay to be shaped, he takes away her right to authenticity. He begins to dictate how she should think, behave, and dream, often under the excuse of guiding or helping. But genuine growth cannot come from external molding. Real development comes from within, through lived experiences, mistakes, and choices that belong entirely to her. When someone else tries to shape her, they are not nurturing her potential, they are imposing their blueprint onto her identity. The irony is that both saving and shaping are often framed as acts of love or protection, but love that seeks to rescue or mold is not love at all, it is control. It assumes that the young woman cannot be trusted with herself, and it undermines the very qualities that make her unique. Instead of being celebrated for her individuality, she becomes a project, a reflection of someone else's expectations. That dynamic does not build confidence, it breeds dependency. She begins to believe that her worth comes from how well she fits into the shape someone else carved for her, or how grateful she should be for being saved. Every young woman deserves the freedom to navigate her own challenges. Struggle is not a weakness to be removed, it is a necessary part of growth. Mistakes are not failures to be avoided at all costs, they are lessons that shape resilience and wisdom. By trying to save her from every hardship, an older man may think he is protecting her, but in reality, he is robbing her of the chance to learn strength. By trying to shape her into what he believes she should be, he denies her the joy of discovering who she truly is. For the older man, the impulse to save or shape often comes from ego. It can feel flattering to believe that someone depends on you, that you are the guiding hand in her life, but true strength is not found in control. It is found in respect, the ability to stand beside her, not above her, and to support without smothering. A man who truly values a young woman does not save her from herself, nor does he carve her into his image. He trusts her enough to let her be her own person. A young woman does not need saving because she is not in danger of being herself. She does not need shaping because she is not raw material to be crafted. What she needs is space, the space to breathe, to make choices, to succeed, to fail, to rise again, and to grow into the woman she is meant to be. The most meaningful role an older man can play is not that of savior or sculptor, but that of witness, someone who sees her as she is and respects her enough to let her live freely. That is the difference between control and care, between possession and respect. And that difference makes all the difference. True maturity is shown through equality because without equality, every relationship, whether romantic, professional, or personal, becomes unbalanced and unsustainable. Maturity is not about how many birthdays you have celebrated, how many years you've lived, or how much experience you've collected. It is about the ability to recognize and honor the inherent worth of another person, regardless of differences in age, gender, or status. When an older man interacts with a younger woman, the real measure of his maturity is not how much he knows or how much he owns, but whether he treats her as an equal whose voice, choices, and boundaries carry as much weight as his own. Equality is the antidote to entitlement. Too often, older men mistake their years for authority, believing that life experience gives them a permanent advantage in wisdom and decision-making. But true maturity understands that everyone, no matter their age, has a perspective that is valuable. It does not dismiss the younger woman's voice as not of or irrelevant. Instead, it makes room for it. Equality says that even if their experiences differ, her voice matters just as much in the conversation. That is maturity, not the need to dominate, but the ability to listen. A man who treats a young woman as his equal demonstrates that he is secure in himself. Insecurity fuels the need for control, the desire to always be the one teaching, guiding, or leading. Security, however, allows space for collaboration. It says, I may know some things you don't, but you know things I don't too. Let's learn from each other. That is a mindset born from growth, humility, and emotional intelligence. When equality forms the foundation of the dynamic, both people gain from the exchange, rather than one constantly giving while the other is expected to receive. True maturity also means respecting boundaries. An older man who insists on crossing lines, whether emotional, physical, or professional, reveals not strength but immaturity. He shows that he values his desires over her comfort. Equality, however, recognizes that boundaries are non-negotiable. It honors her right to say no, her right to change her mind, and her right to set the terms of her own life. A mature man does not see boundaries as obstacles to overcome, but as markers of respect to uphold. Equality is not about erasing differences, it is about balancing them with respect. Age may bring certain advantages, just as youth brings others. One may have more experience, the other may have fresh perspectives and energy. A mature man does not exploit these differences for power, he embraces them for partnership. When he chooses equality, he creates space where the younger woman is not pressured to prove herself or conform to his expectations, but is free to be exactly who she is. The absence of equality breeds resentment. If an older man insists on being the one in control, the younger woman eventually feels suffocated, undervalued, and unseen. What may have started as admiration quickly turns into frustration, but when equality is present, admiration grows into respect, and respect blossoms into trust. That trust is the strongest foundation for any connection, because it tells her she is not being diminished or overshadowed. She is being recognized as a whole person. True maturity is not measured by dominance but by restraint. It is shown in the choice to use experience not as a weapon but as a gift. It is reflected in the ability to walk alongside someone, not ahead of them, and it is proven in the willingness to let go of ego in order to honor another's dignity. A man who treats a young woman as his equal is not threatened by her independence. He is proud of it. He does not fear her growth, he encourages it. He does not view her success as competition, he celebrates it as proof of her strength. In the end, maturity is not about age, it is about character. And character is revealed in how we treat those who are younger, newer, or less experienced than us. To choose equality is to choose respect, fairness, and genuine connection. It is to understand that true greatness is not found in control but in partnership. A young woman does not need to be led, molded, or silenced. She deserves to be met eye to eye, heard clearly, and valued fully. That is where maturity shines brightest, when power is set aside and equality becomes the standard.